Replacing a toilet can seem like a pretty major DIY project, but it's not too bad if you know what you're doing. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the process step by step so you can replace a toilet on your own without having to hire a plumber. So up to this step, what I've done is I've gone ahead and cleaned this toilet thoroughly. Since I have to take this downstairs, I want to make sure it's as clean as it can be. So now that that's out of the way, what we're going to do is we're going to shut off the water to the toilet, and then we're going to flush the toilet to get out as much water as possible. We do have quite a bit of water left in this tank. I'm going to see if I raise this flap up manually, if I can get rid of more, which I can. And probably what I'll do is I'm going to take a towel and kind of soak up the rest of the water that's in this bowl, so that way it doesn't go everywhere. You can see there's quite a bit of water left in the bowl, and on the side here you can tell that there's a P-trap where the water flows up and down, and that's really designed to keep sewer gases out of your house, but that also means that there's water stuck in this P-trap as well, up to about the same level as what's in the bowl. So we need to force out as much of this water as possible because we don't want to get the stairs and the floor wet as we're carrying this outside. Now to get the rest of the water out of the bowl and out of the P-trap, I'm going to use a plunger to basically force air into the P-trap. And you can see the water level went down quite a bit here. And you can hear that sound difference. It sounds like air in the P-trap. That means that most of the water is removed. So we should be good to go ahead and remove this toilet and not get a ton of water everywhere. I do want to reuse this flush handle and this toilet seat, so I'm going to go ahead and remove those next. This is a replacement handle. It's pretty nice. And so what I've done is I've disconnected the flapper on the inside of the toilet, and I'm going to disconnect this arm here. Not all toilet handles work this way, but this one does. And so that's all I have to do to get the arm off. And then to get the rest of this off, I have to unscrew this. Now with toilet handles, it's also important to know that this is left-handed threads, so you have to spin it the opposite direction in order for this to unscrew. Just pull that out of there. Next, I'll remove this toilet seat. And I have to remove these mounts as well with this model. Now that the handle's out of the way and I removed the flapper completely, I've got a little bit more room to work in here. So I'm going to stuff down an old towel and soak up as much water as I can. And then there are rubber seals on the toilet typically, so make sure you use an old towel and not a new one because they might get ruined. Now to remove the tank from the bowl, we first need to disconnect the supply line from the fill valve. Then we need to undo these two bolts at the bottom of this tank in order to remove this from the toilet bowl. We need to unscrew the supply line from the fill valve that's in the toilet tank. And there's going to be a little bit of water that comes out from this, but that's okay. It's expected. So make sure you have a towel available. Now we're going to unbolt the tank from the toilet bowl. And so we're going to just see if we can just unscrew these wing nuts under here, which it looks like we can. So we should be one on both sides. And then we should just be able to lift the tank off of the bowl. It might be stuck. I'm just going to lift this out and set it in the tub next to this for now. Now, your supply line might be continuing to leak, even if it's shut off all the way. It's just a product of these quarter turn valves being old and not working the way they should over time. So just, again, be sure you have towels and things handy to catch any excess water that might be dripping. All right, so now we need to take these caps off of the bolts that hold the bowl to the floor. You might need to get something to pry this off. Here's the one from the other side. And let's get this cap off. I'm not too concerned about damaging these because I've got new ones. There we go. And now we just need to unbolt this from the floor. And do the same thing on the other side. Now I should just be able to lift this straight up, and I'm just going to set this in the tub for now. If you're not sure how to pick out a replacement toilet, I've created another video that I'll link to here that you can go and check out that will talk to you about the critical things you need to know when choosing a replacement toilet. And I've gone ahead and cleaned this area up a little bit, but I wanted to point this out here before we move along any further. You can see there's this one wet spot here in the grout, and that's where this has been, it looks like, leaking a little bit over time. So we want to make sure this has a nice seal to the new toilet when we put the new one in place. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take off this ring. It looks like they used two rings on this, and the reason they did that probably is because it looks like this flange is below the floor, And so since that's the case, they had to get an extra tall ring. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with a single ring that's the right height. I'm just kind of working my way around the floor, prying this up.
That's wax.
This is wax. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, throw this away. And we got to clean the rest of this off really well. Make sure you're careful and don't get any wax down the hole. And I'm going to remove these plastic bolts too. So what you typically do in this situation, since this is below the finished floor height, is you would get a taller wax seal, like a jumbo wax seal. That's going to be about a half an inch taller than the normal wax seals. And that should be enough to get a nice tight seal with a floor like this. If this flange was the same height as the finished floor, then you should just be able to use a standard wax ring. The biggest problem with the wax ring is that once you put the ring in place, you have to make sure when you put the toilet on top of the ring that you don't move the toilet either from side to side or front to back, because if you do that, you risk having this wax collapse and partially block the opening into the plumbing. And if you do that, you're going to have backups, you're going to have problems with it flushing over time. So in order to avoid any problems, you have to make sure that when you're installing the toilet, you just set it down flush and not move it around after it's in place. There are some non-wax options out on the market. This one from Fluidmaster looked like a really good alternative to a wax ring, but once I put it in place, it was too tall. And no matter what I tried in order to get this to seal properly, it was either too tall or too short, which would have caused me to get another kit. So I ended up just going with a jumbo wax ring instead. Now, before I put this in place for real, I'm just going to set this here and line it up with the bolt holes to make sure this is going to sit level and not rock back and forth. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of a rock to it in this back corner. I'm going to make sure to have a shim back here, so that way this will be stable without rocking back and forth. Now the shims I'm going to use are these shims from Reliability. These are some shims that I picked up at Lowe's. And basically you just need some plastic shims to be able to put underneath the toilet. And these are designed specifically for a toilet. They're a lot shorter than a traditional shim. Whatever you do, you don't want to get wood shims, because wood shims, if they get wet, they're going to swell up and start to deteriorate. So make sure you get some plastic or composite shims if you need to shim your toilet. Let me stick this on this back corner. And so I'm going to try and leave that shim in place while I remove the toilet. So that way everything should be lined up when I put everything in place. This off of here. And now I need to put in a new wax ring, and this is the ring I ended up going with. This is a jumbo ring, so it's a taller ring of wax compared to a normal ring. We're going to get our bolts out and put those in the flange first. These basically just slip in here. And these are too tall for the toilet, obviously, but they have some markings on the side to where you'll be able to cut these off after the toilet is bolted down. So just get them parallel to the wall, and that should be good. They should have some plastic washers as well, which will hold the bolts in place. And I'm pulling up on the bolt and pushing down on this plastic washer. So that way these are tight to the flange and won't move around very much when I put the toilet on. We'll kind of peel this back a little bit. So that way when we set it in place, we can take the plastic off real easily. See, like there, it was stuck pretty well. So now put this in place here. When we lift the toilet in place and put it on this wax ring, we need to make sure it goes down straight and not push it from one side to the other or rock it back and forth. If we do that, we risk damaging this wax ring, and it could potentially partially block this hole, or it might not seal properly. And again, we could have leaks or sewer gas and things like that. Position this over the bolts. And it's on the wax ring, I can feel it. Got that shim under there. Seems like it stayed in place just fine. The next thing we want to do is we want to take these nuts and washers and tighten this down so that way the toilet doesn't move around while we do the rest of the steps. We're going to take an adjustable wrench and tighten this down. And we're going to be careful not to apply too much pressure to this, because we don't want the ceramic or the porcelain bowl to crack. And we want to do this a few times on one side and then go to the other side and make sure it is tight as well. We're going to alternate back and forth. So you can see I'm holding the wrench close to the head here. I'm not holding it at the very back. I don't want to have too much leverage. And it seems to be in place. So before we put the tank on, I'm going to install the tank to bowl gasket on the bottom here. Now we can put this on the back. Push our bolts through to the other side. Make sure the tank is on straight. When I say straight, I mean parallel to the wall, just like we did with the toilet bowl. This kit also includes some plastic washers to hold these bolts in place while you install them. So I'm just pushing these on the bottom of the bolts. And now we're going to take these nuts and put it on the bottom. So now we'll tighten these bolts down underneath. Now this toilet specifically, they included a tool for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this and see how it goes. Otherwise, you would take a normal wrench and do this. Just be careful to tighten one side and then the other, just until the tank comes into contact with the bowl. You don't want to over tighten it because then you risk cracking the toilet. And if the bolts spin on the inside, you'll need to take a screwdriver and hold the bolt still on the inside of the tank. Since the old toilet was a regular height toilet and this is a chair height toilet, the supply line is not going to reach the new toilet tank height. So what we need to do is we need to replace the supply line with a new one. Now you can either go with another PEX base supply line and then cut this to length, or you can use a steel braided supply line, and this is what we're going to install here. So I've got a 20-inch line for one because I wasn't quite sure how long I needed this to be, and because I didn't want to have to keep going back and forth to the store, I just got a 20-inch line. And what we'll do here, since this is too long, I can put in a twist to this, so that way it will be able to be the right length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this old supply line. Basically what I need to do is I need to undo this nut down here. That's a compression nut. We'll take the new supply line and attach it here. Get it snug first, and we'll tighten it down about another full turn. Let's make sure it's tight. Okay. Now we'll attach this to the fill valve inside the toilet tank. Make sure it's hand tight. Now we'll turn on the water.
Whoa, so cool.
Now we're going to let this fill up. We're going to flush it a few times, make sure there aren't any leaks around, where the bowl comes into contact with the floor, and also there aren't any leaks around where we connected the supply line to the fill valve, or the other connection from the quarter turn valve up to the supply line. It seems to be a lot quieter than the last toilet too, which is nice.
Yep, very nice.
Very nice. We also might need to make some adjustments to how far this water level comes up, and if we need to do that on this specific model, we can adjust it here. It should be about 1/2 of an inch to an inch below this overflow tube. If it's any higher than that, we'll need to make sure to adjust this to where this shuts off before it gets higher. I don't see any leaks underneath the toilet. This seems to be tight. There's no problems there. I'm going to flush it a few more times just to make sure there are no leaks.
Can I flush it?
Sure, go ahead and flush it. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to put the toilet seat in, and I'm not going to install the toilet seat that came with this toilet. I'm going to install my previous toilet seat because it's a lot better than what came with this kit. The reason why we're putting the same seat in place is because this has a quick clean mechanism to where we can keep this clean a lot easier. We can just slide the toilet lid off of the toilet, clean underneath it, and then slide it back in place, which is really, really cool. It also has a nightlight feature to it. So if you're interested in learning more about that toilet lid that we have here, I'll have a link to that video that will pop up here, and you can go check that video out. Pop this back on, close the tabs, and it's done. Now the only thing we have left to do is cut off those bolts underneath the toilet and put on the plastic caps. The other thing we need to do is replace this flush handle with the one that I saved off the last toilet. But I'm not going to do that in this video because I already have an entire video dedicated to that flush handle. So if you're interested in that, you can click on that video link that I'll have pop up here. Oh, come on. All right, guess what? I forgot. Since I used the bolts that came with the wax ring and not with the toilet, I'm not able to put these caps on, so I'm having to undo the nut and the washer that I put on earlier and replace it with the one that came with the toilet. So, lesson learned. I'm not a huge fan of nylon bolts and or threads, but I'm going to make sure this is covered up, so that's what I have to do. And we'll just take a normal razor blade and cut this off here, cut off these shims so that way they're not sticking out And as a last step, you might want to go ahead and caulk around the outside edge of the toilet. Do not caulk around the back side of the toilet though, because if you ever have any kind of a problem with the toilet leaking, you want to make sure that you know that it's leaking and the leak comes out onto the floor and not just only underneath the floor where you may never see it. So make sure if you do caulk around the toilet to leave a gap at the back, so that way if you have any problems, you'll know about it. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and also check out this other video next. I'm sure you'll like it too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.